I'm Samantha Mitchell, 28, and I never thought I'd be standing in my childhood home with a suitcase in hand, hearing my parents casually suggest I take the guest room or leave. After losing my job and apartment in the same month, I'd expected sympathy, not coldness. The worst part, my younger sister Emma sat there smugly as our parents announced they were converting my old bedroom into her art studio. What they didn't know was that I'd discovered their dirty little financial secret just hours earlier. And moving into that guest room would be the first step in my carefully planned revenge. If you're watching this and have ever felt the sting of family betrayal, you're not alone. I'm sharing my story today because what happened next changed everything for me and my family. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below and hit subscribe if family drama stories like mine keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for how this one ends. 2 months ago, my life in Chicago was everything I'd worked for since graduating college. 6 years at Horizon Marketing had earned me the title of Senior Campaign Manager, with a corner office overlooking the Chicago River. My apartment in Lincoln Park wasn't huge, but it was mine. Hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows that let in the perfect amount of morning light. I'd built a life I was proud of, 300 miles away from my hometown of Springfield and the constant shadow of my younger sister. Then came Black Wednesday, as we called it at Horizon. The company lost its 3 biggest clients in the same month, and suddenly our office was a scene from a corporate horror movie. Whispered conversations, closed-door meetings, and that horrible email asking everyone to gather in the conference room. 40% of the staff was being let go. I was among them. "It's nothing personal, Samantha," my director said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You've done exceptional work, it's just numbers." My severance package would cover 2 months of expenses. In a normal economy, that would be plenty of time to find a new position with my experience. But the marketing industry was in a slump, and my rent was due to increase by 20% the following month. The math was brutal and undeniable. By week 6 of my unemployment, I was packing my gorgeous apartment into boxes and making the call I'd dreaded. "Sweetheart, of course you can come home," my mother had said, her voice warm with concern. "Stay as long as you need to. Your room is just waiting for you." That conversation replayed in my mind as I drove my packed Honda Civic down Interstate 55, watching the Chicago skyline shrink in my rearview mirror. I tried to focus on the positives: time to regroup, apply for jobs without the pressure of impending eviction, home-cooked meals instead of takeout. It was temporary, just a pit stop on my way back to real life. Growing up, I was always the responsible Mitchell daughter. I got straight A's, played volleyball, was student council president, and worked part-time at the local bookstore to save for college. Emma was different. 3 years younger than me, she floated through life on charm and creative potential. Her mediocre grades were excused because artists see the world differently. Her messy room was a creative space. The money our parents spent on her endless art supplies, photography, equipment, and later her aborted semesters at 3 different art schools was an investment in her future. I didn't resent Emma's artistic pursuits. I resented the double standard. When I needed money for a school trip to Washington, D.C., I had to earn half myself. When Emma wanted to attend a 2-week photography workshop in New York, our parents paid in full and threw in spending money. Still, I'd made peace with it years ago. Or so I thought. The familiar streets of Springfield brought a mix of nostalgia and defeat as I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home. The 2-story colonial looked smaller than I remembered. The blue paint slightly faded, but the flower beds were immaculate as always. My mother's pride and joy. Dad opened the door before I could knock, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "There's our career girl," he said, hugging me awkwardly. "Though I guess you're taking a break from all that for now, huh?" The comment stung more than it should have. Mom appeared behind him, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Samantha, welcome home." Her hug was warmer but brief. "You must be exhausted from the drive." Let's get you settled." I expected them to lead me upstairs to my old room. Instead, they hesitated, exchanging a look I couldn't quite interpret. "We've got dinner almost ready," Mom said. "Why don't you just leave your bags here for now? Emma's dying to see you." That should have been my first clue that something was off. But exhaustion from the drive and the emotional weight of the last few weeks had dulled my usual perceptiveness. Emma sat at the dining room table, her blonde hair now sporting purple ends, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up when I entered. "Hey, corporate casualty," she said with a smirk. "Welcome back to the real world." Emma, Mom chided weakly. "Your sister's been through a lot." Dinner was a strange affair. My parents asked surface-level questions about Chicago but changed the subject whenever I mentioned job prospects there. Emma dominated the conversation with tales of her latest artistic breakthrough. Apparently, she was combining photography with mixed media collage. Now, whatever that meant. It wasn't until dessert that they dropped the bomb. Samantha Dad began setting down his fork. "We need to talk about arrangements." Mom jumped in, her voice too bright. "We're so happy to have you home, but things are a bit different now. Emma has really needed space for her art, and we promised her she could use your old room as a studio. The light is perfect in there," Emma added. "North-facing windows, essential for my process." I stared at them, waiting for the punchline. None came. "So, where am I supposed to sleep?" I asked, the reality slowly sinking in. "The guest room is all made up for you," Mom said quickly. "It's quite cozy." Or Dad added, not meeting my eyes. "If that doesn't work for you, we understand. You're an adult. You might prefer your own place." The guest room. The musty wood-paneled afterthought in the basement, with its lumpy pull-out sofa and single tiny window near the ceiling. The room where we stored Christmas decorations and old tax returns. That was to be my home. "Can I at least see my old room?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Emma rolled her eyes. "It's not really your room anymore. I've already set up my supplies." Upstairs, my childhood bedroom was unrecognizable. My bed was gone, replaced by a large table covered in art supplies. My desk remained but was cluttered with Emma's photography equipment. The walls, once pale blue, were now stark white. Every trace of my existence had been erased. "We packed your things," Mom said, pointing to a few cardboard boxes stacked in the corner. "Just some old books and mementos." I nodded numbly, unable to form words around the lump in my throat. The guest room was exactly as I remembered, dark, cramped, and unwelcoming. A set of fresh sheets sat folded on the pull-out sofa like a sad welcome gift. "It's just temporary," Mom assured me, flicking on the harsh overhead light. "Just until you get back on your feet." That night, lying on the lumpy mattress, I allowed myself to cry. Not just for my lost job or apartment, but for the realization that in my parents' home I was an afterthought. A guest. I fell asleep with tear-stained cheeks and a knot in my stomach, determined to find a way out as quickly as possible. What I didn't know then was that the basement's thin walls would prove to be my parents' undoing. Because at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, I overheard my father in his office directly above me arguing with my mother about money, specifically money that should have been mine. I woke to the sound of the furnace kicking on, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings, before reality crashed back. The basement guest room. My new home. I checked my phone, 7:15 a.m. The house was quiet above me, meaning I had time to myself before facing my family again. I needed to update my resume and research local marketing firms, so I headed to my father's office to use the printer. The door was unlocked and I slipped inside, immediately comforted by the familiar smell of old books and leather. Dad's office had always been off-limits when we were growing up, which naturally meant Emma and I had snuck in whenever possible, though never with the courage to actually open any drawers or cabinets. I spotted the printer on the credenza and set to work, but when I tried to open the paper tray, it was jammed. Kneeling down to check the problem, I noticed something odd. A file cabinet partially hidden behind the credenza, its key dangling from the lock. In all my childhood snooping, I'd never seen this cabinet before. Curiosity got the better of me. I slid it out just enough to open the top drawer. Inside were meticulously labeled folders, taxes, house insurance, and one that caught my eye immediately: Mitchell Trust Fund. Trust fund? What trust fund? I pulled the folder out with trembling hands. Inside were legal documents, bank statements, and letters dating back 5 years, to when my grandmother died. I'd been in Chicago, then unable to get much time off from my entry-level position, but I'd flown back for the funeral. Grandma Mitchell had been dear to me. She'd always slipped me extra money for books and encouraged my ambitions, telling me I reminded her of herself when she was young. The first document made my breath catch: a copy of my grandmother's will. I scanned it quickly, my heart pounding when I reached a particular paragraph. I hereby bequeath the sum of $350,000, $350,000, to be divided equally between my beloved granddaughters Samantha Jean Mitchell and Emma Louise Mitchell, to be held in trust until they reach the age of 25 years. I did the math quickly. That meant $175,000 for each of us. I had turned 25 3 years ago, and no one had said a word to me about any inheritance. With growing disbelief, I continued through the documents. There were legal letters from someone named Arthur Pendleton, who appeared to be the executor of my grandmother's estate, asking my parents about disbursing my portion of the trust now that I'd turned 25. Then I found my father's responses claiming that since I was financially independent with a successful career, they were reinvesting my portion for my future. But the bank statements told a different story. Regular withdrawals labeled Emma's art supplies, Emma's tuition, Emma's New York trip. A check for $45,000 for studio renovation just 3 months ago. Each withdrawal signed by both my parents. They had been using my inheritance to fund Emma's artistic endeavors. My money. Money that could have saved me from the humiliation of moving back home. Money that was legally mine. The most recent bank statement showed approximately $70,000 remaining in the account, less than half of what should have been my share alone. They'd blown through most of Emma's portion and a significant chunk of mine. I was photographing the documents with shaking hands when I heard footsteps on the stairs. I quickly returned everything to the drawer, slid the cabinet back into place, and pretended to be fixing the printer when my father walked in. "Morning, kiddo." "Trouble with the printer." I forced a smile. "Just a paper jam. I think I fixed it." He looked momentarily suspicious but nodded. "Job hunting already? That's my girl." I wanted to scream at him to demand answers about the trust fund, but instinct told me to stay quiet. I needed more information and I needed to be strategic. That afternoon I texted my friend Rachel, who had become a lawyer in Springfield after law school. We met for coffee at a cafe far from my parents' neighborhood. "So legally, what are we looking at here?" I asked after explaining the situation. Rachel's expression was grim. "It's fraud, Sam. They had no right to use your portion of the inheritance without your knowledge or consent, so I could sue them." She hesitated. "You could, but there are complications. There's a statute of limitations on this kind of thing, and it started running when you turn 25. Plus, they're your parents. Family court cases get ugly fast." I stirred my coffee, mind racing. What about Emma? Did she know? Hard to say. Was she CC'd on any of the correspondence? I didn't see her name on anything. Then she might be in the dark too. Your parents could have told her the money was just from them. I considered this. Emma was self-centered and entitled, but would she knowingly steal my inheritance? I wasn't sure. "What would you do?" I asked Rachel. She leaned forward. "Document everything. Get copies if you can. Then decide if you want to confront them directly or pursue legal action. But Sam, whatever you decide, be careful. Money changes people, and family money is the worst. Back at the house, I waited until everyone was asleep that night before returning to the office. This time I came prepared with my phone to photograph every document in detail. I also found more disturbing information. My parents had remortgaged the house to help fund Emma's art career, and their retirement accounts were significantly depleted. As I carefully returned the last document to its folder, a new emotion joined my anger: fear. My parents were in their early 60s and headed for financial disaster. Despite everything, I didn't want to see them destitute in their old age. But I also couldn't ignore the betrayal. I lay awake that night on the uncomfortable pull-out bed, staring at the ceiling and formulating a plan. Direct confrontation might be satisfying, but it wouldn't necessarily get me what I deserved. Legal action would be costly and potentially futile given the statute of limitations. No, I needed something more sophisticated. Something that would expose the truth, secure my financial future, and possibly even save my family from themselves. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The basement guest room quickly became my own personal purgatory. The pull-out sofa destroyed my back, and the single tiny window near the ceiling provided barely enough light to tell day from night. The musty smell of old cardboard and forgotten holiday decorations permeated everything. I bought scented candles, but the smell of artificial vanilla only created a strange new odor I called festive mildew. I established a routine. Up at 6 a.m. to shower before anyone else needed the bathroom. Quick breakfast, usually alone. Out the door by 8 to job hunt at the local library or coffee shops. Back home for dinner, where I'd endure my family's conversation before retreating to my underground lair for the night. Any luck with the job search today? My father would ask each evening, the question containing equal parts concern and impatience. A few promising leads, I'd reply, which wasn't entirely a lie. I was applying to local marketing positions, just not with the desperation they assumed. Meanwhile, Emma floated through the house like she owned it. Which, in a way, she did. My parents had essentially given her my inheritance and my bedroom. The sounds of her creative process echoed through the house. Music blaring, occasional frustrated shouts, the constant rearrangement of furniture. "Emma's working on a major new series," Mom would explain, when I winced at a particularly loud crash from upstairs. It's important not to disturb her flow. My flow apparently was not a consideration. The basement had terrible cell reception, and whenever I tried to use the living room for phone interviews, I was inevitably asked to relocate, because Emma needed the space to lay out her concepts. "Can't you just use the guest room?" my mother asked, not recognizing the irony of calling my current living space a guest room. "There's barely enough light down there to see my own hands, Mom." She had the decency to look embarrassed, but still ushered me out. "Emma has a deadline for this collection. She's hoping to get a showing at the Preston Gallery." I bit my tongue and retreated downstairs, adding another tally to my mental score of injustices. The more time I spent in the house, the more I noticed how Emma had completely manipulated our parents. They lived in fear of disrupting her artistic temperament. They praised her mediocre work with the enthusiasm of gallery owners discovering the next Picasso, and they continued to fund her endeavors despite obvious financial strain. One evening I overheard them arguing in hushed tones in the kitchen. "David, I'm worried about the mortgage payment next month," my mother whispered. "The property taxes are due too." I know," my father replied, sounding defeated. "But what can we do? Emma needs these materials for her showing. It could be her big break. Maybe we should ask Samantha to contribute something for rent. She's eating our food using utilities." My father sighed. "How would that look, charging our own daughter rent when she's down on her luck? Emma's our daughter too, and we're financing her entire life. That's different. Emma has talent. She just needs the right opportunity." I slipped away before they could notice me, my heart pounding with anger and hurt. Different indeed. The next day, I ran into my high school friend Melissa at the grocery store. She worked at the local bank and had always been the town gossip. "Samantha Mitchell, I heard you were back in town, staying with your parents." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just temporarily." "Well, it must be nice to be home. Your parents are so proud of Emma. They were just in the bank last week taking out another home equity line. Your dad said it's for Emma's big gallery debut. Isn't that exciting?" My stomach dropped. Another loan. They were already underwater on the mortgage. Super exciting. I managed, quickly changing the subject. That night, I added financial research to my evening routine. While my family thought I was applying for jobs in my basement dwelling, I was actually documenting every piece of evidence about the trust fund and my parents' deteriorating financial situation. I was also researching the local art scene, particularly the Preston Gallery that Emma was so desperate to get into. During the day, I started volunteering to help around the house, cooking dinner, doing laundry, cleaning. Not out of generosity, but strategy. It gave me access to mail overhear conversations and generally keep tabs on the family finances. It also helped ease some of my parents' unspoken resentment about having me back home. "You're such a help, Samantha," my mother said one afternoon as I folded laundry. "It's nice having another adult in the house." The implication that Emma at 25 wasn't considered an adult wasn't lost on me. My father occasionally tried to have heart-to-hearts with me about my career setback, as he called it. "Sometimes these things are blessings in disguise," he said one evening when we were alone. "Maybe this is a chance to reassess. You know, find something less demanding than the career I spent 6 years building," I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. He patted my knee. "I just mean something that would let you stay closer to home. Emma will be hitting it big soon, and your mother and I aren't getting any younger." The subtext was clear. They were grooming me to be the responsible daughter who would take care of them in their old age, while Emma pursued her dreams on my dime. 3 weeks into my basement existence, Emma burst into my room without knocking. A particularly egregious invasion, given that the pull-out sofa where I slept was also my only private space. "I need your help," she announced, flopping down beside me. With what I asked, closing my laptop where I'd been updating my documentation of their financial fraud. "Marketing stuff. You're good at that corporate jargon, right? I need a better artist statement for my portfolio. The Preston Gallery requested it." I blinked at her. "You want me to help you market your art?" "Well, yeah. You're not doing anything else right now, and this is important." The audacity was breathtaking, but it sparked an idea. Here was my entry point. "Actually," I said slowly, "I could probably do more than just an artist statement. I could help with your whole presentation to the gallery." Emma's eyes lit up. "Really? That would be amazing." "On one condition," I said. "I need to see all your work and understand your financial situation. A marketing strategy has to account for production costs, pricing structure, all of it." She hesitated, but only briefly. "Sure, whatever. Mom and Dad handle most of the money stuff, but I can show you my work tomorrow." That night, I updated my plan. Phase 1 was officially in motion. Gain Emma's trust and insert myself into her art career. From there, I could access all the financial information I needed and position myself perfectly for what would come next. As I lay on the lumpy mattress, staring at the water stains on the basement ceiling, I felt a twinge of guilt. Was I really planning to sabotage my own sister? Then I remembered the documents in my father's office, the inheritance that should have saved me from this very situation, and the casual way they'd relegated me to this basement. While handing Emma my bedroom and my money, the guilt evaporated. This wasn't sabotage. It was justice. And it was just beginning. The Springfield Public Library had become my daily sanctuary. Quiet, air-conditioned, and most importantly, not my parents' basement. I was scrolling through job listings at my usual table when someone tapped me on the shoulder. "Samantha Mitchell, is that you?" I looked up to see Marcus Preston, my high school debate team partner. He'd filled out since graduation, traded his glasses for contacts, and somehow managed to look both professional and artistic in a well-tailored blazer over a graphic t-shirt. "Marcus, hi," I stood to hug him. "What are you doing here?" He grinned. "I own a little place called the Preston Gallery. Maybe you've heard of it." My heart skipped a beat. The Preston Gallery, the very place Emma was desperately trying to get into. This was either an incredible stroke of luck, or the universe playing a cruel joke. "That's your gallery, wow, I'm impressed. Last I heard you were studying business at State. Art business specifically. Came back after graduation to take over my aunt's gallery and modernize it a bit." He gestured to the chair across from me. "Mind if I join you?" Over coffee in the library's small cafe, Marcus and I caught up on the last decade. He'd built the Preston Gallery into the most prestigious art space in 3 counties, featuring both established artists and promising newcomers. "Enough about me," he said eventually. "What brings Springfield's marketing superstar back from Chicago? Last I saw on Facebook, you were killing it up there." I gave him the condensed version of my professional downfall and temporary living situation, leaving out the basement, bedroom, and family drama. "That's rough," he said sympathetically. "But their loss is Springfield's gain. We could use someone with your talent around here." "Actually," I said, seizing the opportunity, "I've been thinking about the local art scene. My sister Emma is an artist. She's mentioned your gallery." Marcus's expression shifted subtly. "Emma Mitchell, purple hair, does the mixed media collage stuff." I nodded. "She's persistent. Comes by the gallery about once a month with her portfolio." And I prompted. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, I don't want to be rude about your sister. It's okay, Marcus, we're not exactly close. Be honest." He sighed. "Her work isn't ready, Sam. It's technically competent but derivative. No original voice. I've tried to give her constructive feedback, but she doesn't seem to take it well." This aligned with my own assessment of Emma's art, though I had limited expertise. What I did know was marketing, and I suddenly saw a clear path forward. What if I helped her develop her brand? I've got experience marketing to high-end clients. I could help shape her narrative, create something more gallery-worthy. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's generous of you considering your situation." I shrugged. "Family is family. Besides, I need a project while job hunting." "Well," he said slowly, "I am putting together a special exhibition in 3 months. New voices, focusing on emerging local artists. If she could develop a more cohesive collection with a compelling story behind it, I might consider including her." Trying to contain my excitement, I asked casually, "How many pieces would she need? And is there an application fee?" 6 to 8 strong pieces with a unified theme. No fee, but there is a selection committee. And I'll be honest, they have high standards. We exchanged numbers with a promise to meet again soon. As I watched Marcus leave, I felt a momentary pang of guilt for using our reconnection as part of my plan. But I quickly rationalized it. I wasn't lying about helping Emma. I just had additional motivations. That evening at dinner, I casually mentioned running into Marcus Preston from the gallery. Emma dropped her fork with a clatter. "You know him. We were debate partners in high school," I said, taking a sip of water. "Apparently he's putting together a New Voices exhibition, looking for emerging artists." The transformation in my family was instantaneous. Suddenly, I had everyone's undivided attention. "Did you mention Emma to him?" my mother asked, leaning forward eagerly. "I did. He said he's familiar with her work." Emma snorted. "Yeah, because I've been trying to get into that stuck-up gallery for 2 years." "Well," I said carefully, "he mentioned that they're looking for cohesive collections with a strong narrative." I offered to help you with the marketing aspect given my background. You did what? Emma looked suspicious. I offered to help. That's what family does, right? My parents exchanged glances, clearly thrown by this development. That's very generous, Samantha, my father said. I don't need marketing, Emma huffed. My art speaks for itself. Actually, I countered, all art needs marketing. Even Picasso had dealers and promoters. The story behind the collection matters as much as the work itself, at least when it comes to getting into galleries and selling pieces. I could see Emma wrestling with her pride versus her desperation to get into the Preston Gallery. Desperation won. Fine, she said finally. What exactly are you suggesting? Let me see your current portfolio, understand your artistic vision, and help craft a narrative that will resonate with Marcus and his selection committee. I'll also help with pricing strategy, presentation, all the business aspects that artists typically hate. And what do you get out of this? Emma asked, still suspicious. I smiled. The satisfaction of helping my little sister, of course. Plus, it gives me something productive to do while job hunting. Later that week, Emma reluctantly showed me her studio, my former bedroom. Her work was exactly as Marcus had described. Technically proficient but lacking originality. Lots of photographs layered with paint fabric and found objects, but no coherent vision or emotional impact. What's the story you're trying to tell? I asked, examining a particularly chaotic piece. Story? Emma looked blank. It's about texture and contrast, visual impact. But what does it mean? What are you saying to the viewer? She shrugged. That's up to them to decide. This was going to be harder than I thought. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into Project Gallery. I researched what was selling in regional art markets, which emerging artists were getting attention, and what themes resonated with critics. I scheduled regular coffee meetings with Marcus under the guise of getting his professional input, but also to understand exactly what his selection committee looked for. They want authenticity, he told me during one such meeting. Something personal, but universal. And frankly, a sense that the artist is committed to their vision long term, not just throwing together a collection for a single show. I guided Emma toward a theme of fragmented heritage, using family photographs and heirlooms in her collages to explore identity and inheritance. The irony was not lost on me. I also encouraged her to focus on quality over quantity, helping her select the strongest pieces and refine them rather than constantly creating new work. My parents were thrilled with my involvement, especially when Marcus agreed to visit our home for a preliminary viewing of Emma's collection. This could be it, my mother said excitedly, as she stress-cleaned the house before his visit. Her big break. It's definitely going to change everything, I agreed, though not in the way she imagined. The day before Marcus's visit, I overheard my parents in the kitchen again. We need another $15,000 for the framing and final materials, my father was saying. I can pull it from the retirement account. David, there won't be anything left, my mother replied, her voice tight with worry. What choice do we have? We've come this far. Emma needs this to launch her career, and once she starts selling pieces, she can pay us back. And if she doesn't sell anything? There was a long silence before my father responded. Then we sell the house. Downsize. That night I called Rachel for another legal consultation, this time asking specific questions about financial fraud and statutes of limitations. As I suspected, my window for legal action regarding the trust fund was closing fast. I would need to move forward with my plan soon. The next day, Marcus came to view Emma's revised collection. I had coached her extensively on how to present her work, emphasizing the personal connection to each piece and the overarching theme. I'm exploring how family legacies shape our identities, she explained, sounding remarkably articulate for once. How what we inherit, physically and emotionally, fragments and reforms through generations. Marcus walked thoughtfully from piece to piece, occasionally nodding. When he finished the circuit, he turned to Emma with a smile. This is significantly stronger work than what you've shown me before. There's an authenticity here I haven't seen in your previous submissions. Emma beamed, shooting me a quick, grateful look. I'd like to include 3 pieces in the New Voices exhibition, Marcus continued, with potential for a small solo show later if these are well received. My parents looked like they might faint from excitement. Emma actually squealed. I maintained a pleased but professional demeanor, even as my mind raced ahead to the next phase of my plan. That's wonderful news, I said, stepping forward to shake Marcus's hand. I know Emma is incredibly honored. Perhaps we should discuss the logistics, marketing, pricing, commissions. Yes, absolutely, Marcus agreed. Why don't we set up a meeting next week at the gallery to go through all the details? As we walked Marcus to the door, he pulled me aside briefly. Whatever you did, it worked. Her new direction has promise. I smiled. Sometimes artists just need the right guidance to find their authentic voice. What I didn't tell him was that phase 2 of my plan was now ready to launch, using Emma's gallery debut to expose the financial deception at the heart of my family. The day after Marcus's visit, I sat alone in a coffee shop across town, far from any prying eyes, and mapped out my 3-phase plan in detail. Phase 1 had been successful. Help Emma create a genuinely marketable collection and secure gallery representation. This positioned me as the supportive sister, gave me access to all financial aspects of her art career, and set the stage for what would come next. Phase 2 would be trickier. Leverage the financial investment my parents were making in Emma's exhibition to expose the trust fund issue. This would require careful timing and psychological manipulation. Phase 3 was the endgame. Secure my rightful inheritance and independence, while ensuring my family faced the consequences of their actions without completely destroying them. I closed my notebook feeling a mix of determination and apprehension. The plan was complex and required perfect execution, but I couldn't see another way to achieve justice while preserving some semblance of family relationship. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Contract paperwork ready for Emma. Can you both come by gallery tomorrow at 3 p.m.? I texted back an affirmative, then messaged Emma to coordinate. She responded with a string of exclamation points and emojis. The next day, I drove us to the Preston Gallery in downtown Springfield. The converted Victorian house had been beautifully modernized, with clean white walls and strategic lighting that made the artwork pop. Marcus greeted us in the main exhibition space. Before we get to the paperwork, let me show you where your pieces will be displayed, Emma. He led us to a well-lit corner of the gallery. The New Voices exhibition will open here, with your Fractured Memories piece as one of the anchor works. Emma was practically vibrating with excitement. I maintained a pleased but professional demeanor as we moved to Marcus's office to review the contract. Standard gallery commission is 50%, Marcus explained, sliding the document across his desk. The exhibition opens in 8 weeks. We'll need your final pieces properly framed and ready to hang 2 weeks before that for photography and catalog preparation. Emma's eyes glazed over at the business details. Whatever, I'm just excited to finally be showing at Preston. I cleared my throat. Actually, Emma, we should review the terms carefully. For instance, what's your insurance coverage for the artwork while it's in the gallery's possession? Marcus looked impressed. Good question. We have general coverage, but artists are encouraged to have their own insurance as well. I turned to Emma. That's another cost to consider in your budget. Budget, she laughed. Mom and Dad are handling all that. Speaking of which, I said, pulling out a notebook, we should establish exactly what expenses you're looking at to finalize these pieces. Marcus, in your experience, what do emerging artists typically invest in a debut exhibition? He thought for a moment. Framing is the biggest expense. Museum-quality framing for pieces this size could run $500, $700 each. Then there's insurance, transportation, photography for the catalog, promotional materials. A conservative estimate would be around $5,000 total, not counting the value of the artwork itself. Emma looked momentarily worried, but then shrugged. Mom and Dad will cover it. They've already invested quite a bit in your career, I noted carefully. It might be good to track exactly how much this exhibition costs, so you can pay them back from sales. Pay them back? Emma looked at me like I'd suggested she donate a kidney. They don't expect that. It's an investment in my future. An investment implies eventual returns, I countered gently. Just something to think about. The seeds were planted. As we finished the meeting and headed back to the car, Emma was quiet, possibly considering financial realities for the first time. Do you really think I should pay Mom and Dad back? She finally asked as we drove home. I think it's worth knowing exactly how much they've invested in your career. Transparency about money is important in families. She nodded slowly. I guess I never really thought about it that way. Phase 2 was officially underway. Over the next few days, I created a detailed spreadsheet of all exhibition-related expenses, including estimates for framing, photography, and insurance. I presented it to my parents one evening after dinner. I thought it would be helpful to track all the costs associated with Emma's gallery debut, I explained, sliding the printout across the table. Just so everyone's on the same page. My father glanced at the bottom line. $6,250 estimated total, and paled slightly. That's higher than we anticipated. But necessary, my mother added quickly. This is Emma's big break. Of course I agreed. I just thought having everything itemized would help with financial planning. Emma mentioned you're handling all the expenses. We are, my father confirmed, folding the paper and tucking it into his pocket. We've always supported Emma's artistic endeavors. That's very generous, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I was also wondering if you've considered setting up a separate business account for Emma's art career. For tax purposes. My parents exchanged a quick glance. We have an arrangement that works for us, my father said stiffly. I see. Well, if you need any help organizing the financial aspects, let me know. My background in marketing included budget management. The conversation shifted to safer topics, but I had accomplished my goal, making them nervous about financial scrutiny. Meanwhile, I had secretly been job hunting and had secured 2 promising interviews at local marketing firms. I kept this information to myself, wanting the flexibility to move forward with my plan without my family's knowledge. The first interview went well, but the position was more junior than I was hoping for. The second, however, was with Meridian Marketing, a growing agency that served clients throughout the Midwest. The creative director, Janet, was impressed with my Chicago experience. We've been looking to expand our corporate client base, she explained during our interview. Someone with your background would be invaluable. 2 days later, Janet called with an offer. Not quite Chicago salary level, but respectable for Springfield with potential for growth. I accepted immediately, but asked for a 3-week start date to wrap up family obligations. Janet agreed, and I had my escape route secured. That evening, I researched apartments and found a modest 1-bedroom unit in a converted warehouse downtown. I signed the lease the next day, putting down the security deposit from my dwindling savings. I would move in the weekend before starting at Meridian. With my own situation stabilized, I could focus fully on the final stages of my plan. I scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor friend, Thomas, asking him to come to the house to discuss retirement planning options with my parents. Just present the general information, I told him. I'll guide the conversation where it needs to go. The day before Thomas's visit, I deliberately left copies of some trust fund documents where my mother would find them while cleaning. Specifically the letters from the executor, asking about dispersing my portion. I placed them in my bedside table drawer, partially visible under some job search papers. That evening, my mother was quiet at dinner, avoiding eye contact with me. She had taken the bait. Thomas arrived the next afternoon, professional in his navy suit. I'd introduced him as a financial advisor friend who's offering free consultations. My parents, always eager for financial advice, welcomed him to the living room. After covering basic retirement strategies, Thomas casually mentioned trust funds. Many families use them for intergenerational wealth transfer. They can be quite tax efficient when managed properly. I watched my mother's hand tighten around her teacup. Of course, Thomas continued, there are strict legal requirements for trustees. Misappropriation of trust fund assets can have serious consequences, including tax penalties and legal liability. My father shifted uncomfortably. Hypothetically, what constitutes misappropriation? Thomas looked thoughtful. Using trust assets designated for one beneficiary to benefit another would certainly qualify. Also, failing to disperse funds when stipulated conditions are met, like the beneficiary reaching a certain age. The tension in the room was palpable. I excused myself to get more coffee, giving my parents a moment to exchange panicked glances. When I returned, the conversation had moved on to safer topics, but the damage was done. The seed of fear had been planted. Phase 2 was progressing perfectly. Later that night, I heard my parents arguing in hushed tones behind their bedroom door. I couldn't make out the exact words, but the stress in their voices was unmistakable. They knew they were vulnerable. With Emma's exhibition approaching and my new job and apartment secured, I was working on multiple fronts, helping Emma prepare her artwork while quietly documenting every financial transaction related to her career, building my case, piece by piece. The final element of Phase 2 involved Marcus. During one of our regular coffee meetings to discuss exhibition details, I deliberately steered the conversation toward art valuation. How do galleries determine pricing for emerging artists? I asked. It's part science, part art, he explained. We look at medium-size technique, comparable artists in the market. For someone like Emma, we'd start conservative. Perhaps $1, $200 to $2,000 per piece. I nodded thoughtfully. And what's the typical sales rate for debut exhibitions? He hesitated. To be honest, it varies widely. Some sell nothing, others sell out. It depends on the work, the marketing, the economic climate. What's your gut feeling about Emma's collection? Marcus sighed. Her work has improved dramatically with your guidance. But first, shows are always challenging. I'd manage expectations. Maybe 1 or 2 sales. This confirmed my suspicions. My parents had invested tens of thousands in Emma's career, with very little chance of financial return. The house of cards was ready to collapse. That night, I finalized the details of Phase 3, the confrontation that would bring everything to light. The 6 weeks leading up to Emma's exhibition passed in a blur of activity. My basement exile became a distant concern as I spent most of my time either at the gallery with Marcus or in Emma's studio finalizing the collection. Emma, to her credit, was working harder than I'd ever seen her. The looming exhibition deadline had transformed her from dilettante to determined artist. She was in her studio from dawn until late evening, refining details, adjusting compositions, and actually taking feedback seriously for once. What do you think of the texture here? She asked one afternoon, gesturing to a particularly complex section of her centerpiece. Too busy. Maybe simplify that corner, I suggested. Let the central photograph breathe a little more. She nodded thoughtfully and made the adjustment without argument. A small miracle in itself. My parents had gone into full support mode, emptying their retirement account for the final promotional push. My father had withdrawn $12,000, their remaining liquid assets, for framing photography and a small catalog Marcus suggested for the exhibition. It's an investment, he kept repeating, though his voice held less conviction each time. Mom had transformed the dining room into exhibition headquarters, with checklists, timelines, and contact information for everyone involved in the show. She spent hours on the phone, inviting everyone they knew, from distant cousins to my father's golf buddies. The gallery will be packed, she assured Emma. First impressions matter in the art world. I had secured significant media coverage through my old marketing connections. A feature in the local newspaper's arts section, mentions on 2 regional culture blogs, and even a short segment on the Springfield Community Television channel. The exposure was genuine. I wasn't sabotaging Emma's chance at success. My revenge didn't require her failure, just the exposure of the financial deception. 2 weeks before the exhibition, I accidentally left another set of trust fund documents where my mother would find them. This time bank statements showing withdrawals for Emma's art supplies with my name clearly visible as a beneficiary of the account. That evening, Mom was uncharacteristically quiet at dinner, her eyes red-rimmed. She kept looking between Emma and me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Guilt perhaps, or fear. "Is everything okay, Mom?" I asked, innocently. "Just tired, dear. So much to do before the exhibition." Dad gave her a warning look which she pretended not to notice. The next morning I found my mother alone in the kitchen, clutching her coffee mug like a lifeline. "Samantha," she began hesitantly, "have you been going through your father's office?" I maintained a neutral expression. "I've been using the printer for job applications." "Why?" "No reason," she said quickly. "Just some papers seemed moved." "Maybe Dad reorganized," I suggested. "Or Emma needed something. She's been pretty scattered with all the exhibition stress." Mom nodded relief, crossing her face at the plausible explanation. Yes, that must be it. The tension in the house was becoming unbearable. Dad started bringing work home to avoid conversations. Mom cleaned obsessively. Emma remained oblivious, focused entirely on her art. 1 week before the exhibition, the framed pieces returned from the frame shop. They looked impressive. Museum-quality frames elevated Emma's work significantly. Even I had to admit that the collection had visual impact. "They're beautiful," Mom breathed when the delivery arrived. "Emma, honey, come look." Emma emerged from her studio paint, smudged on her cheek, and for a moment her face showed genuine wonder. "Wow, they look real." "They are real," Dad said, putting his arm around her shoulders. "And they're going to sell for real money at a real gallery." The childlike hope in his voice made my stomach twist uncomfortably. For a brief moment I questioned my plan. Was I being too harsh? Then I remembered the basement room, the stolen inheritance, the years of favoritism, and my resolve hardened again. 3 days before the exhibition, I met with Marcus to review the final arrangements. The gallery looked stunning. Fresh paint, perfect lighting, the exhibition space transformed to showcase the New Voices collection. "Emma's pieces will be featured prominently," Marcus explained, walking me through the layout. "The Fractured Heritage series has a strong narrative that ties the exhibition together." "And the price points?" I asked. We settled on $1,800 for the smaller works, $2,500 for Fractured Memories, the centerpiece. I nodded. Even if every piece sold, unlikely for a debut show, the total would barely cover half of what my parents had invested in Emma's career over the past year, let alone the trust fund money. "Who will be attending the opening?" I asked. "The usual crowd. Local collectors, some critics from Springfield and 2 from St. Louis. A few gallery owners I have relationships with. Plus, all the people your parents have invited. Any serious buyers likely to attend?" Marcus hesitated. "A few possibilities. But Sam, I want to manage expectations here. First, shows are about exposure more than sales. Emma should consider it a success if she gets good feedback and makes connections." "I understand. I'm just trying to get a complete picture." That evening I finalized arrangements for my new apartment. The lease began the day before the exhibition opening, though I hadn't told my family I was moving out yet. I had already secretly packed most of my essential belongings and stored them in my car trunk or at Rachel's house. The night before the exhibition, Mom prepared an elaborate good luck dinner. The dining room table was set, with the good china candles lit, a bottle of expensive champagne chilling, probably purchased with the last of their credit card limit. Emma looked uncharacteristically nervous, pushing food around her plate. "What if no one likes it?" she asked suddenly. "What if everyone thinks I'm a fraud?" "Don't be silly," Mom said quickly. "Your work is beautiful. Marcus wouldn't have given you a show if he didn't believe in your talent," Dad added. I took a sip of champagne. "The work is solid, Emma. Remember, first shows are about establishing yourself in the scene. Sales will come with time. But Mom and Dad have spent so much." Her voice trailed off as she glanced at our parents. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. "We believe in you," Dad said firmly. "That's what parents do." "Both of you," Mom added, looking at me with that same guilty expression I'd noticed earlier. I raised my glass. "To Emma's debut. May it be everything you've all invested in." The double meaning wasn't lost on my parents, who exchanged anxious glances. After dinner, I retreated to my basement room to pack the last of my belongings, clothes for the exhibition opening and a few personal items. Tomorrow would change everything, and I needed to be prepared. As I folded my clothes, I heard Emma's footsteps on the stairs. "Can we talk?" she asked, hovering awkwardly in the doorway. I gestured for her to enter. She perched on the edge of the pull-out sofa, looking around the dismal room as if seeing it for the first time. "This place is pretty awful, isn't it?" she said. I shrugged. "It's temporary." "I wanted to thank you," she continued, "for everything you've done to help with the exhibition. I know I've been difficult sometimes." "That's an understatement," I said, but softened it with a small smile. She twisted her hands in her lap. "I'm scared, Sam. What if tomorrow is a total disaster? Mom and Dad have put everything into this. I mean everything." For a moment I saw my little sister again. Not the entitled artist who had taken my room and my inheritance, but the insecure girl who had always lived in my academic shadow, trying to find her own path. "It won't be a disaster," I said gently. "Your work is good, Emma. Not groundbreaking, but genuinely good. And regardless of what happens tomorrow, it's time for some honesty in this family." She looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "You'll see," I said. "Try to get some sleep, tomorrow's a big day." After she left, I lay awake for hours, staring at the basement ceiling, mentally rehearsing what I would say during the confrontation to come. The exhibition opening wasn't just Emma's debut as an artist, it was my moment of reckoning with my family. The evening of Emma's gallery opening arrived with picture-perfect weather. Clear skies, mild temperature, a gentle breeze. I had moved the essentials to my new apartment that morning while everyone was busy with last-minute exhibition preparations, telling my family I was running errands. My plan was set. After the exhibition, regardless of how it went, I would initiate the confrontation that would change our family forever. I dressed carefully in my Chicago Power outfit, a tailored black pantsuit, emerald silk blouse, and the pearl earrings my grandmother had given me for college graduation. Looking in the mirror, I hardly recognized the woman who had slouched into the basement guest room 2 months earlier. My posture was straight, my eyes clear and determined. I was Samantha Mitchell again, not a defeated guest in my own family home. The Preston Gallery was transformed for the evening. String lights illuminated the Victorian facade, and a small red carpet led to the entrance, where Marcus greeted guests in a sleek charcoal suit. Inside, the white walls provided the perfect backdrop for the artwork, each piece precisely lit to highlight its best features. Waiters circulated with champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. Emma's collection occupied the main wall of the front gallery space. I had to admit that Marcus had done an excellent job with the installation. The pieces worked together coherently, telling a visual story about family memory and identity. The centerpiece, Fractured Memories, dominated the display. A large mixed-media work incorporating old family photographs, fabric from our grandmother's clothing, and bold emotional brushstrokes of color. My parents arrived, looking simultaneously proud and terrified. Mom had splurged on a new dress, and Dad wore his one good suit freshly pressed. Emma appeared last, attempting artistic chic in a black dress with dramatic jewelry, her purple-tipped hair freshly touched up. "The place is packed," Dad whispered excitedly, surveying the growing crowd of well-dressed attendees. It was indeed a good turnout. Many were clearly friends and acquaintances invited by my parents, but I also recognized several serious collectors Marcus had mentioned, along with a few people I assumed were critics given their studied expressions and notepads. Marcus clinked a glass for attention and delivered a short welcome speech, highlighting the New Voices exhibition concept and specifically mentioning Emma as an emerging talent with a unique perspective on family heritage and identity. Emma blushed furiously beside him, looking both terrified and exhilarated. Then the real evaluation began as guests moved through the gallery studying the artwork, whispering comments to each other occasionally, making notes. I circulated unobtrusively, catching snippets of reactions. Interesting use of layering. The narrative is a bit obvious, but there's technical skill. Not particularly original, but competent execution. The reviews were lukewarm, not scathing but far from the effusive praise my parents had clearly expected. I watched their faces fall as they eavesdropped on similar conversations. Emma, to her credit, handled herself well, answering questions thoughtfully, explaining her artistic choices without becoming defensive. The coaching I'd given her was paying off, at least in terms of presentation. An hour into the event, however, the critical issue became apparent. No one was making purchases. The small red dots that would indicate sold pieces remained conspicuously absent beside Emma's work. My parents grew increasingly anxious, Dad checking his watch repeatedly, Mom compulsively straightening already perfectly aligned appetizer plates. Emma maintained her composure, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Marcus approached me at the refreshment table, keeping his voice low. "The response is better than I expected, actually. Good attendance, genuine interest. But no sales," I noted. He sighed. "That's typical for a debut. It takes time to build collector confidence. My parents didn't realize that. They've invested everything in this show." Marcus winced. I tried to manage expectations. First, shows are about exposure, connections, getting feedback. The money comes later, if at all. I know. But they were counting on immediate returns. He looked troubled. "That's not how the art world works. Even established artists can go months between sales." "I understand," I said. "And now I think it's time for the next phase of the evening." Thomas, my financial advisor friend, had arrived as planned and was making small talk with one of the critics. I caught his eye and nodded slightly. He excused himself and made his way to where my parents stood, anxiously monitoring Emma's wall. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Thomas Wyatt. We met a few weeks ago to discuss retirement planning." My father looked confused. "Yes, of course. Are you an art collector as well?" Occasionally, Thomas smiled. "Your daughter's work is interesting. Planning to invest the proceeds in that retirement account we discussed?" Mom laughed nervously. "Well, we've actually invested quite a bit in Emma's career already." "A good art career is like any business venture," Thomas commented. "Requires capital investment, tax planning, proper accounting, especially when trust funds are involved. Those have specific tax implications." My mother's champagne glass nearly slipped from her fingers. "Trust funds. Yes, they're complex instruments. Mismanagement can lead to serious penalties. I actually specialize in helping families navigate those waters." Dad's face had gone pale. "If you'll excuse us," he said stiffly, "I need to speak with my wife privately." They retreated to a quiet corner, heads together in intense conversation. Phase 3 was unfolding perfectly. I approached Marcus again. "Would it be possible to use your office for a private family discussion? Something's come up." He looked concerned but nodded. Of course. Take as long as you need. I gathered my parents and Emma, leading them to the quiet of Marcus's office at the back of the gallery. As the door closed behind us, the sound of the exhibition faded, replaced by tense silence. "What's going on?" Emma demanded. "I should be out there with my guests." "It's time for some honesty," I said calmly, turning to my parents. "Tell her about the trust fund." My father's face hardened. "This is hardly the time or place, Samantha. On the contrary, it's perfect. Tonight is about Emma's art career, a career funded with money that should have been split between us." Emma looked bewildered. "What trust fund? What are you talking about?" I turned to her. "Grandma Mitchell left $350,000 to be split equally between us when we turned 25. My half, $175,000, has been used to finance your art career for the past 3 years. Without my knowledge or consent." Emma's eyes widened as she turned to our parents. "Is this true?" The silence was damning. Mom, Dad, Emma's voice had risen an octave. "Tell me this isn't true." My father sighed heavily, suddenly looking much older. "It's complicated. Your grandmother wanted to provide for both of you, but Samantha was already established in her career. You needed the support more, so you just took her money." Without telling either of us, Emma looked genuinely shocked. "We were going to pay it back," Mom said weakly. "Once you started selling your art." I pulled out my phone, bringing up the photos I'd taken of the trust documents. "I have copies of everything: the will, the bank statements, the correspondence with the executor. Every withdrawal for Emma's art supplies, Emma's tuition, the studio renovation. It's all documented." My father's face flushed with anger. "You've been spying on us." "I found the documents by accident," I replied evenly. "But yes, once I knew what you'd done, I gathered evidence." "What are you planning to do?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. "Sue your own parents." "I could," I acknowledged. "What you did was legally fraud. But that's not my goal." "Then what do you want?" Dad demanded. "Acknowledgement. Repayment. And honesty about what you've done. Not just to me, but to Emma too. You've crippled her by making her dependent on your handouts, instead of learning to support herself." Emma flinched as if I'd slapped her. "That's not fair. I've worked hard on my art." "Yes, you have," I conceded, "especially these past few weeks. But you've never had to face financial reality. Do you have any idea how much Mom and Dad have spent on your career? They've remortgaged the house, emptied their retirement accounts, and stolen my inheritance. All to fund an art career that, let's be honest, is unlikely to ever provide a living wage." The brutal truth hung in the air between us. "We're only trying to help her follow her dreams," Mom said quietly, "like parents are supposed to." "What about my dreams?" I asked. "I lost my job, my apartment, and was relegated to a basement guest room, while Emma took my bedroom as her studio. Meanwhile, money that legally belonged to me could have prevented that entire humiliation. No one had an answer for that." "We should return to the exhibition," my father finally said. "People will wonder where we've gone." "Running away from the conversation won't change the facts," I said. "But fine. Let's maintain appearances for now. We'll continue this at home." We returned to the gallery floor, each of us struggling to compose our expressions. The evening continued with artificial smiles and hollow congratulations. By closing time, not a single piece had sold. As we gathered Emma's belongings, Marcus approached with a sympathetic smile. "A very successful first showing in terms of exposure," he assured her. "Several critics took extensive notes, and the curator from the Springfield Museum seemed interested in your technique." Emma nodded numbly, still processing the revelations from our confrontation. The drive home was silent tension, thick as fog between us. We all knew that once we arrived, the real reckoning would begin. The front door had barely closed behind us when my father turned to me, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. How dare you ambush us like that, at Emma's exhibition of all places? Would you have preferred I did it at a family dinner? I replied calmly. Oh wait, that's where you casually told me to take the guest room or leave. That was different, Mom protested weakly. We didn't think you'd be staying long. Because I've always been self-sufficient, right, the responsible one who doesn't need help. Meanwhile, Emma gets every advantage, including money that legally belongs to me. We moved to the living room, the four of us taking positions like boxers in separate corners. My parents on the sofa, Emma curled in the armchair, me standing by the fireplace. Let's be absolutely clear about what happened, I began, my voice steady. Grandma left $350,000 to be split between Emma and me when we each turned 25. I turned 25 3 years ago and never received my share. Instead, you've been using it to fund Emma's art career without my knowledge or consent. It wasn't like that, Dad insisted. We were managing the money for both of you. Really? Then where's my half? Where's the accounting of how it was spent? Where was my input into those decisions? He had no answer. I have documented evidence of fraud, I continued. Bank statements, withdrawal slips, everything. The statute of limitations isn't up yet. I could take legal action. My mother began to cry quietly. We never meant to hurt you, Samantha. We thought we were doing what was best for both of you. By stealing from me to finance Emma's hobbies, how exactly was that best for me? You were successful, Dad exclaimed. A great job in Chicago, your own apartment. Emma needed the support more than you did. And now, when I lost my job and apartment and needed that money, what's your justification now? He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Emma spoke up for the first time since we'd left the gallery. I had no idea, Sam, I swear. I thought the money was coming from Mom and Dad. I believe you, I said, and I did. Emma was self-centered, but I didn't think she was deliberately malicious. But that doesn't change the fact that you benefited from their fraud. How much? Emma asked, turning to our parents. How much of Sam's money have you spent on me? Mom looked to Dad, who sighed heavily before answering. About $100,000. Maybe a bit more. Emma's jaw dropped. $100,000. On what? Art school tuition. 3 different programs. Materials. Studio renovation. Workshop fees. Travel for artistic inspiration. That New York trip last year was $15,000 alone. And what's left of my share? I asked, though I already knew the answer from my research. About $70,000, Dad admitted. We were planning to use it for the exhibition costs but used our retirement fund instead when you came home. We thought you might need your money now. How generous of you to consider giving me access to my own inheritance, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. What about my portion? Emma asked. Is any of it left? Mom and Dad exchanged uncomfortable glances. We used yours first, Mom explained hesitantly. It made sense at the time since you were already 25 and Samantha's career was going so well. So you spent all of my inheritance too? Emma's voice rose in disbelief. All of it. Dad nodded miserably. We really believed your art career would take off, that you'd make it all back and more. Emma collapsed back into the armchair, looking suddenly small. You spent over $250,000 on my art and I haven't sold a single piece. The truth hung heavy in the air between us. It gets worse, I said, not without sympathy. They've also remortgaged the house and emptied their retirement accounts. Emma looked horrified. Is this true? We believed in you, Dad said defensively. Parents are supposed to support their children's dreams. Not at the expense of their own financial security, I countered. And certainly not by stealing from one child to fund the other. What happens now? Mom asked, her voice small. Are you going to sue us, Samantha? I took a deep breath. This was the moment my plan had been building toward. No, I'm not going to sue you. But I am going to insist on full accountability and repayment. How? Dad asked bitterly. We have nothing left. I've secured a position at Meridian Marketing here in Springfield. I start in 2 weeks. I've also signed a lease on an apartment downtown. I'm moving out tomorrow. They all stared at me in surprise. You found a job, an apartment, when Mom asked. While helping Emma with her exhibition. I've been planning this confrontation for weeks. Emma looked hurt. So you were just using my exhibition as part of your revenge plan? Not entirely. I genuinely helped you create a stronger collection. Marcus wasn't lying. The critical response was better than he expected. But yes, I saw an opportunity to bring everything to light and I took it. And now, what Dad demanded. You walk away and leave us in financial ruin. No, now we create a repayment plan. The remaining $70,000 of my inheritance will be transferred to my name immediately. For the rest, you'll make monthly payments from your income until the debt is cleared. We can't afford that, Mom protested. You'll have to downsize the house, I said, matter-of-factly. It's too big for you anyway and the mortgage is underwater. Sell it, buy something smaller, use any equity to start repaying what you owe me. The brutal financial reality silenced them. And me? Emma asked quietly. What happens to me? I looked at my sister, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. Behind the entitlement and artistic pretensions was a 5-year-old woman who had never been asked to stand on her own feet. You get a job, I said, not unkindly. A real one that pays the bills. You keep making art on the side, building your skills and portfolio without the pressure of financial dependence. Maybe you sell something eventually, maybe you don't. But you stop draining our parents' resources in the meantime. I don't have any job skills, she whispered. You're smart and creative. You can learn. Everyone starts somewhere. There was a long silence as my family absorbed the new reality I was proposing. This feels like punishment, Dad finally said. It's not punishment, I replied. It's consequences. For the first time in this family, we're facing financial reality instead of living in fantasy. And if we refuse, he challenged. If we don't agree to your terms, then I pursue legal action. Fraud charges have serious consequences, Dad. Do you really want to risk that? The fight seemed to drain out of him all at once, his shoulders slumping in defeat. No, he said quietly. You're right. I made a terrible mistake. I'm sorry, Samantha. The simple apology, perhaps the first genuine one I'd ever received from him, caught me off guard. I felt my carefully constructed wall of anger begin to crack. I just wanted what was best for both my girls, he continued, his voice breaking. I thought I was doing the right thing, supporting the child who needed it more, but I was wrong. So terribly wrong. Mom moved to sit beside him, taking his hand. We both were. We should have been honest from the beginning. With both of you. Emma looked up, tears streaming down her face. I had no idea what they were sacrificing for me. All these years, I thought. I don't know what I thought. That money just appeared for whatever I wanted to do. For the first time in months, perhaps years, we were having an honest conversation as a family. No pretense, no favoritism, just painful, necessary truth. I don't expect repayment overnight, I said, my tone softening slightly. But I do expect acknowledgement of what happened and a genuine commitment to making it right. We acknowledge it, Mom said firmly. And we will make it right somehow. I'll help too, Emma added. I'll get a job, pay my own way from now on. I nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions, vindication, sadness, and something that might eventually become forgiveness. Then that's where we start, with honesty and accountability. As the conversation continued into the early morning hours, we began the painful but necessary process of rebuilding our family on a foundation of truth rather than deception and favoritism. It wouldn't be easy, and the wounds wouldn't heal overnight. But it was a beginning. 3 months after the confrontation at the gallery, I sat in my downtown apartment enjoying Sunday morning coffee and the view of Springfield's modest skyline. My place wasn't large, a one-bedroom unit in a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls and tall windows. But it was mine, paid for with my salary from Meridian Marketing, where I'd quickly become a valuable team member. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma on my way with bagels. Emma had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of anyone in our family. The day after our confrontation, she'd applied for jobs all over Springfield. Within a week, she'd secured a position as an administrative assistant at a local arts nonprofit. The pay was modest, but it covered her share of rent at the small apartment she now shared with a roommate. My parents had followed through on downsizing, selling the family home within 6 weeks of our confrontation. The housing market in Springfield wasn't great, but they'd managed to break even after paying off the mortgage. They now lived in a 2-bedroom condo in a 55-plus community on the outskirts of town, significantly reducing their monthly expenses. We'd worked out a repayment plan for my stolen inheritance. The remaining $70,000 had been transferred to my account immediately. For the rest, they paid what they could each month, usually around $500, which I invested for my future. At that rate, it would take years to repay the full amount, but the acknowledgement of the debt was almost as important as the money itself. A knock at the door signaled Emma's arrival. She entered with a brown paper bag and 2 coffee cups. "I know you already made coffee," she said, handing me a cup, "but I was at that new place on 5th Street and wanted you to try it." She looked different now. The purple hair dye had grown out, replaced by her natural blonde. She dressed more simply, no longer trying so hard to look like an eccentric artist. But the biggest change was in her demeanor. More grounded, less entitled. We settled at my small dining table, spreading cream cheese on our bagels. "How's the job?" I asked. "Good, actually. I'm learning a lot about arts administration. The director mentioned I might be able to curate a small exhibition in the community gallery next year." She smiled. A much more realistic goal than my previous delusions of grandeur. "That's great, Emma. And your artwork?" "Slower, now that I'm working full-time, but better, I think. More authentic." She hesitated. "Marcus came by the nonprofit yesterday. He's interested in a piece from my new series for a group show." "That's wonderful. Just one piece and a smaller show," she clarified quickly. "But it feels more legitimate this time. No parental financing, just my work being judged on its own merits." Our Sunday brunches had become a regular thing, part of the new, more honest relationship we were building. We weren't best friends and probably never would be, but we were finally sisters in a real sense. After Emma left, I drove to my parents' condo for our weekly family dinner. Another new tradition, these dinners were sometimes awkward, occasionally tense, but increasingly genuine. Dad answered the door, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. Retirement suited him, even if it hadn't been entirely by choice. He'd found a part-time consulting position that supplemented their Social Security income. "There she is," he said, giving me a quick hug. "Mom's just finishing up in the kitchen." Their new place was small but comfortable, decorated with family photos, including several they'd found of my grandmother. Her portrait now held a place of honor in the living room, a silent acknowledgement of how they'd betrayed her wishes. Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Our relationship had been the slowest to heal, perhaps because her betrayal had felt the most personal. "I made your favorite lasagna," she said by way of greeting. "Looks great, Mom." We settled around their new, smaller dining table. The conversation flowed more naturally now, though we still occasionally stumbled into sensitive territory. "I saw Marcus yesterday," my father mentioned as we ate. "At the grocery store. He asked about you." I nodded. "We get coffee sometimes. He's been a good friend through everything." "Just a friend," Mom asked, her matchmaking instincts apparently intact despite everything. "For now," I admitted, "we're taking it slow." "Well, he seems like a nice young man," Dad said. "Sensible, business-minded." The irony of my father now valuing those qualities wasn't lost on any of us. After dinner, as I helped Mom with the dishes, she turned to me with unexpected tears in her eyes. "I don't think I've properly apologized to you, Samantha." "Not really." I paused, plate in hand. "What your father and I did was unforgivable. We convinced ourselves we were doing what was best, but—" She shook her head. "We were wrong. So wrong. And I'm so deeply sorry." The simple, heartfelt apology meant more than all the repayment plans and downsizing. It was acknowledgement, finally, of the real harm they'd done. "I'm not saying I've forgiven everything," I said carefully. "But I'm working on it. We all are." She nodded, understanding the boundaries I was still maintaining. Later that evening, I sat with my father on their small patio watching the sunset. "I've been thinking about your grandmother a lot lately," he said. "She always said you reminded her of herself. Practical, determined, clear-eyed about the world. I wish I'd known her better." "She would have been appalled at what we did with her money," he admitted. "But proud of how you handled it. You didn't destroy us when you could have." "That was never my goal, Dad. I know that now." He hesitated. "We've made a change to our will. Everything will be split equally between you and Emma. Not that there's much left," he added, with a self-deprecating laugh. "But it's the principle." I nodded, appreciating the gesture for what it was. Another step toward healing. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey of the past 5 months. From the humiliation of being relegated to the guest room, to the satisfaction of exposing the truth and the complex process of rebuilding family relationships on more honest terms. The guest room ultimatum had been a blessing in disguise. It had forced me to confront the dysfunctional patterns in our family and take action rather than continue accepting the unacceptable. In seeking revenge, I'd actually found something more valuable: truth, accountability, and the beginning of genuine respect. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus: "Free for dinner tomorrow night." I smiled. Another new beginning. Life wasn't perfect. The family wounds were still healing, the financial restitution would take years, and trust remained fragile. But for the first time in my adult life, my relationships with my parents and sister were based on reality rather than pretense and favoritism. That perhaps was the best revenge of all. If you've ever dealt with family betrayal or financial deception, I hope my story resonates with you. The path to healing isn't easy, but it starts with facing the truth. Have you ever had to confront a difficult family situation? What helped you move forward? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if my family drama kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that subscribe button and like this video to support more authentic storytelling. Thank you for listening to my journey from basement exile to reclaiming my life and family on more honest terms. Until next time, remember that sometimes the guest room is just the first chapter of a much bigger story.